Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to All Era Sports with Sirhan, coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America on this 20th of January, 2026. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day today, especially guys over there in the Hoosier State in Indiana. I'll touch you guys as the first story here in a second. Lots to cover here tonight. Coaching vacancies are being filled in the NFL. A heavyweight fight between two guys who should never be in the ring again is supposed to take place. And I relive a heavyweight division mess of over 4 decades ago, which is why we have the heavyweight mess we have today. And we can point to that as a poster child of it. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Of course, the top news took place last night, and the greatest story ever told is going to be told forever and ever and ever. It was Indiana beating Miami, and a lot closer game than people expected. But of course, it was due to all the cheap shots by Miami during the game and the cowardice of Michael Irvin on the sideline. And I'll touch on the cowardice of Michael Irvin here in a minute. But to Indiana, Exhibit A is why Fernando Mendoza was the perfect Heisman winner and the rightful Heisman winner, despite everyone's claim that others should have gotten it over him. But he was a rightful winner, made the plays that mattered most, especially when we talk about that 12-yard touchdown run that put him up 10 late in the ball game, which basically pulled away. You could probably say sealed it. And just be big throw after big throw after big throw to guys like Omar Cooper Jr., among many others. And of course, the real play that you could probably say this is the real play that won it was the blocked punt touchdown by Kamara that set up the game ahead touchdown by Isaiah Jones, the block into the end zone. Perfectly timed play, perfectly timed block that set into the end zone. And when they say you want to coach to win versus coach not to lose, Curt Cignetti coached to win on some big balls, fourth quarter drives on fourth down. And he just said, we're going for it. He went for it and got it. And that's why Indiana and everybody in the Hoosier State, 90 minutes from where I live, was jumping for joy. And it was a well-earned and well-deserved moment. You guys deserve your kudos. And it will forever be the greatest football story ever told. You can talk about all the stories you want. It don't matter. You can talk about anything you want in the football realm, high school, college, or pro. But what Curt Cignetti did from when he was hired at Indiana to now to build this power is something nothing is going to top, maybe ever at any level. And we talk about some of the iconic college football coaches in the history of that sport. He's already up there just because of this 1 year run that he was able to pull off. And I said before the game yesterday, everybody talks about that offense, what they do. That defense finds ways to beat you. They started slowing down the Miami offense. And of course, the intentional interception by Carson Beck right into the hands of Jamari Sharp, which basically was the end. And that's why Indiana's celebrating, and they deserve everything they got. Wire to wire, start to finish, the best team in college football. And you can slice it all you want. You can dice it all you want. You can nitpick it all you want. But they started the year the best team in the nation. They ended the year the best team in the nation, and you can't deny it. The results speak for themselves. They went out there and earned it. No matter what anyone tries to say or try to break down, they did it. They earned it. And those guys down there in South Beach are getting their karma for all the cheap shots that they delivered throughout that game, especially the head hit to Fernando Mendoza, which should have had that guy tossed, and at least a half dozen pass interferences that was missed. But it didn't matter. Fernando Mendoza said, I'm taking matters into my own hands, and he did it. That's why Indiana's celebrating. You guys over there at the Hoosier State, it's your moment. Go out and celebrate because it belongs to you and you only, no matter how hard anyone tries it. Now to the losers, and you guys carry yourselves like a bunch of losers in Miami, and I mean a bunch of losers. We'll start with what happened when the defensive player threw a punch at Jamari Sharp after he had the interception when Sharp was trying to congratulate him. And of course, Carson Beck walks off the field without showing any kind of sportsmanship, acting like a big baby after being, 10 years in the collegiate football level? I mean, I can lost count after his 5th year. And he carried himself like a coward, walked away like a big baby because he doesn't know how to show sportsmanship. But then again, when you talk about players that come out of the University of Georgia, what do you know them for? Poor sportsmanship. You can take Carson Beck out of Georgia, but you sure the hell ain't taking Georgia out of Carson Beck, because Carson Beck acted like the normal Georgia player would in a losing situation like that. And that was just petty, lame, poor, and disrespectful as a human being for what Carson Beck did walking off the field. They lost fair and square. He played about as well as he possibly could. But as I said, leading up to this game, everybody talks about the Indiana offense. Indiana defense has so many ways they could have beat you, and that's what they did throughout the season and in this national title game. And they made very, very few mistakes, which shows the discipline that Curt Cignetti and his fingerprints showed across that particular team throughout the season. So Miami, get over it. You lost fair and square. You delivered all kinds of cheap shots to make things worse on yourself, to make you guys look bad, and it really did, because you're holding a big fat L down there at South Beach, down there at the U, and it was well deserved. You better accept it, and you better take it, because it was coming. And if it weren't for all those cheap shots, India probably ran you out of the stadium, because they were that much better. It's just flags were swallowed, cheap shots were taken, and that's why the game was as close as it was. But in the end, you could not deny Indiana, and that's why the right winner was the right winner last night. Now to the cowardice of Michael Irvin, the Miami alum. He's been a coward for the longest time since he ever wore the U uniform, and he's been a coward every time he's put on TV, and he showed it again when he did the BTA, and I think everybody knows what that means in the sports fraternity. You're a 60-year-old man carrying yourself like that kind of a coward. It says a lot about who you have been your entire life. And you've been that way at Miami. You was that way in Dallas. You were lucked out that Jimmy Johnson was able to put his wraps around you. You underachieved as a wide receiver in your playing days. And you always verbally slander Stephen A. Smith. It's coming from a guy who's not a Stephen A. Smith fan, in front of everyone, because you take everything too personally and because you are a coward. And how you acted being on the sidelines for Miami University during this run signifies why you are one of the bigger cowards to ever come around the football landscape. And I know you have your love for putting the white powder in your nose, and I'm not talking about baking soda. That doesn't excuse the fact that you're supposed to be a grown man, a mature man, and not a coward on the sidelines. And you were been this way even back in your playing days in Miami, and even your playing days in the NFL with Dallas. And you're one of the reasons why karma came knocking on the door for Miami last night in the form of Miami University, and it was well deserved. And I'm sorry if I'm that harsh, but it's who you are at the end of the day. I've seen your career from start to finish, going back to college in your NFL years in Dallas. Talent, but underachieved. Only because you can't lay off the white powder in your nose, or because you want to carry yourself like a coward on the sidelines during Miami's season and college football playoff run, and it came into an end, and you got your karma just like everybody down there at the U, because you guys don't know how to carry yourselves, and you guys don't know how to conduct yourselves. Look at how Indiana do it, and because they did it, that's why they're the winners, and the rightful winners. Sorry, but it's the truth. If for all you people that's new, I'm seeing some of you guys out there. I said when I put this on, I'm telling the truth. I'm not. If you don't like it, so what? Because some people are afraid to speak out the truth, and it's time the truth be told. That Michael Irvin's cowardice came knocking on his door in the form of karma, and it goes back to his playing days in Miami as well as his playing days in Dallas and the NFL, as he underachieved. And for him to act the way he acted throughout the collegiate football tournament for Miami, for guys, I believe somewhere in the 60s or close to it, speaks volumes as to who he is at the end of the day. Actually, we'd be better off never hearing from this guy ever again. Plain and simple. Now for Curt Cignetti. He said 4 words at the press conference. I win, Google me, the day that he was hired. Little did we know, I win, Google me means he was going to win the national title over there in Miami, and that's what he did. And that's what he did. And now this guy has become the face of Indiana sports. And we think of what Indiana's Hoosier sports, collegiate sports for the longest time, being a basketball school under the late Bob Knight. It passed over to Curt Cignetti, and now Curt Cignetti is going to take that throne for the power he's built in Indiana, and they're going to be winning a lot of games coming up for quite a while, because when you have something like this happen, and everyone sees it, and now with the nil and the transfer portal and everything as it is, everyone's going to want to go over there. And when you have someone like Curt Cignetti doing what he did this entire season, as you trace back to when he was hired, because he was building to this point, you're going to have, when you reach this mountaintop and do it without any shortcuts, the way Indiana did, it opens eyes. And that transfer portal is going to open for him and Indiana University for a long time. And that program is going to be among the tops, at least in the Big Ten, or whatever whatever they want to call it. And as long as he's there and the foundation is set the way it is, they're going to be a power, and they're not going to be knocked off for a while. Good luck down the line, because Indiana hired a Jim, and that guy's not going anywhere anytime soon. That guy probably will get a contract for life over there in Indiana, because that's how the Indiana administration treats their own. And it's shout out to how they do things. And we talk about some of the staples for college coaches, like Lou Holtz over at Notre Dame, Nick Saban at Alabama, among many others historically. In the next 10 to 15 years, everybody's going to be talking about Curt Cignetti at Indiana, and you're going to see all kinds of documentaries, books, online stories, and everything about it, because Curt Cignetti is officially the greatest story ever told in football history at any level: high school, college, pro. Accountability, discipline, and that's the tidbit of why they had the success they had. And the reason why the guy's serious on the sideline, because the guy wants to win more than anything else. And he takes his job seriously, and everybody makes fun of it in this internet era. I get it. But Curt Cignetti wanted to win just as much as the most players did, and he might show it on his face, but he has it in here. And once you have it in here, that takes you a lot closer to the top than you think. And that's why Curt Cignetti stamped his place as the greatest football story ever told last night, wire to wire. Best team in the nation, even though the polls didn't say it. But that's where they wanted to get to. That was their goal. That was their mission. And it was mission accomplished. I'll be talking about more about this guy for many, many years, and so will everybody. And I see everyone want to pull their old tweets about how, or try to delete their old tweets about how they were wrong about Curt Cignetti. Go ahead, have at it. I mean, people have screenshots of it, especially over there in Indiana. And I tell you guys, over there in Indiana, fry them. Especially Paul Finnebaum, who is a skinhead, useless dork who should never be on television ever again, because of what type of a coward he is. Actually, he and Michael Irvin should have a little one of those closed room get-togethers, and I'll say this cleanly, because those two cowards deserve each other, and the college football community will be better off without Paul Finnebaum and Michael Irvin. And Curt Cignetti put the final stamp, and I'll wrap it by saying this again, and it's not just the greatest college football story ever told, it's the greatest football story ever told at any level, because no one could foresee it coming after what Curt Cignetti took over when he was hired by the University of Indiana. And that's why he's where he's at. In the next 15 to 20 years, all kinds of sports documentaries, all kinds of stories will come out, and it's going to be nothing but positive, and it's going to probably continue on and on and on, probably for the next 3 to 4 decades, because this is one of those stories those kids over the next several decades are going to live to tell about and pass the wisdom on the upcoming athletes. Beautiful, amazing. And there's no other word I could put for this because it's indescribable. You'd have to watch it and you'd have to live through it to see what that event was for that university and for the entire nation of college football. Amazing. So that takes care of the the national championship between Indiana and Miami. Now we're going to touch on the NFL coaching vacancies. Few of them filled over the last few days. John Harbaugh going to the Giants. I think it's a solid hire. As I said, I think Harbaugh and the Ravens needed to go their own separate ways because it got to a point to where everything got stale. And because it got stale, at some point, you just have to part ways. And that's what happened. I think a fresh start for Harbaugh is what's needed. I think he'll do well over there with Jackson Dart and Cam Scadaboo. Of course, he's going to have to fill the staff. We'll see where that goes. But he's going to have the Giants playing better in an upward direction. Of course, yesterday was Kevin Stefanski hired by the Falcons. And earlier today, we know Baker Mayfield just went off on a rant about Kevin Stefanski for whatever reason, because they're now in the same division. I mean Atlanta and Tampa Bay. So the Tampa Bay Atlanta matchups next season is going to have an interesting and unique storyline. We consider what's about to take place there. And we know how Baker Mayfield is when some of this happens. He's not one to keep quiet. He's outspoken on it. And those two Tampa Bay Atlanta matchups next season will be must-watch TV as a result. Especially the first one is going to have a lot of buzz all over the place because of that storyline. And we know how much the NFL loves storylines. Of course, earlier today, Robert Saleh being hired by the Titans. I think it's a solid hire. I just thought the Jets to set him up to fail badly, and even which included Aaron Rodgers, who set him up to fail. I think another chance was coming because the job he did this season in San Francisco as a defensive coordinator, despite being as short-handed as it was just absolutely stellar. He's going to get another chance as a head coach. And basically chances from to wipe the slate clean, start all over with a young quarterback in Cam Ward, and we'll see what direction that goes. It's going to take some time, but I think at the end, that's a solid hire. Looks like Pittsburgh is going to hire Brian Flores. I would say look like, but probably because I think they had the second interview. I said this to Pittsburgh fans a few years back. The biggest mistake they made was letting this guy go when he was an assistant to Mike Tomlin over there because the players responded to him. And Mike Tomlin apparently told the Pittsburgh brass, get this guy, being Brian Flores. It looks like they're going to get him. The other option is Mike McCarthy, but Mike McCarthy shouldn't even coach in the NFL ever again because how awful he was in Dallas. But Brian Flores might be the answer. Jesse Minter's got a couple of opportunities. Mike McDaniel withdrew from the Cleveland head coaching job, understandably so because it's Cleveland. Dan Pitcher, the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, looking to become the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay. And boy, is that going to cause a major rift here in Cincinnati if that happens, because they're going to bring Brian Callahan back. And we know what happened the last time Brian Callahan was here as the Bengals offensive coordinator. That won't end well. So NFL head coaching vacancies is just as wild as all the storylines in the postseason. Actually, I'm ready for the offseason to start because I said I think this offseason, once the offseason begins in the NFL, may be more intriguing than ever when you consider the teams that were eliminated from the playoffs, especially the so-called heavy favorites, and the directions they're going to go, and some of the key jobs available in the NFL in terms of head coaches and assistants. It's going to probably be the most intriguing and fascinating NFL offseason in many, many years because of it. And I'm ready for this league new year to start because even free agency is going to be wild with all the storylines that's about to take place. I'll touch on that when the time comes. And it's going to be wild. So that takes care of that segment. For those of you new, tomorrow night, I usually call it Pick 'em Wednesday. I will pick my championship games in the AFC and NFC. I'm looking forward to that. Both intriguing matchups with some wild circumstances in both games. Now to the world of boxing. this fight may belong in the category of a fight that has no business taking place. But when you consider the fact that these two guys are probably on their last leg anyways, maybe the best bet for them is just to pound each other out and get carried out on stretchers before they go to the grave, because that's where these two fighters we're about to talk about belong. That being Deontay Wilder and Derek Chisora. War Chisora. That's what I have to say about that fight, because that's what I think is going to happen. Intriguing. It should have taken place a few years before, when both guys were still somewhat relevant. But I know Chisora wanted one last fight before he hangs it up for good, and it looks like this is going to be the fight. And I said before about Deontay Wilder, the day Tyson Fury broke him, he was broken for good. And I don't know what's left of him, but whatever's left of him is not going to have a shot at this, because the guy has been irrelevant since the Fury trilogy. I mean, he got pounded by Joseph Parker and Zhilei Zhang. And he had a win in the middle against a fighter who is probably worse than an 8th string Walmart cart shopper. But Deontay Wilder trying to hang on to whatever is left of that name of his. And he's going to overseas to face an England crowd favorite. I mean, there's a reason why they chant War Chisora over there in England, over there across the pond. And I think he's going to pack Wembley Stadium, because it's supposed to take place in Wembley sometime in the spring. And I expect him to fill that crowd. And I know Wilder has a name that's going to help it. And Derek Chisora, if I'm Derek Chisora, whatever fight you have left in that body of yours, and you want this to be your last fight, beat it out on Wilder, the same way Tyson Fury, Joseph Parker, and Zhilei Zhang did, and just go out on a high note. And while you're going on the high note, make sure the world never sees or hears of Deontay Wilder ever again, because the boxing world and the world would be a better place if Deontay Wilder ceases to exist from this world. And good luck, Derek Chisora. And I'm just going to say 2 words once again: War Chisora. And that's what I expect to happen in April. Whatever's left in that body, beat it out. Beat it out on Wilder every single which way possible, to the way Tyson Fury did. And make sure, as you go out, Deontay Wilder goes out and stays out and never comes back, because the boxing world will be a better place as a result. I'd say Derek Chisora was a fascinating story out of England. Fought them all in that, all the heavyweights in that country at that time. I mean, Fury and Dillian White, just to name several of them. And always gave the honest effort, and that's why he's respected in the English boxing community, especially in the heavyweight division, when England had all the heavyweights. He didn't beat them all, but gave the honest effort, and never left anything on the table. Has a heart as big as the country of England. And for this last fight of his, if this is his last fight, whatever's left of that fight in his body, he's going to beat it out, and hopefully beats it out so bad we never hear from Deontay Wilder ever again, because the boxing world will be better off never hearing from him. Derek Chisora, War Chisora, do the world a favor, go out on a high note, and beat what's left of this guy and send him out to pasture. It would be a thing of beauty. War Chisora. I'll just leave it at that. And I conclude with, speaking of a heavyweight mess, I conclude with one newbies. I do a historical perspective in the sport of boxing, and I'm doing it tonight. And this is the epitome of what the heavyweight division was back in the mid-'80s. It was Tony Tubbs and Tim Witherspoon for one of the fake heavyweight championships, because at a time when the heavyweight division and the governing bodies wanted to have their own business. And we talk about what happened after the belt split and the control Don King had on the heavyweight division. This is what he had. And no one is going to mistake this fight for being Ali Frazier or Holyfield Bowe, because it wasn't. When you talk about this particular fight, nothing much to really talk about. It was just a lethargic effort by both guys, but Witherspoon just did just enough to win on majority decision. But this fight, I bring this up because everyone talks about the cowardice of the governing bodies in the sport, and we all know what it is. It started 4 decades ago when all this came out. And it's more poignant in the heavyweight division then because everybody knew that back then boxing was what the heavyweight division was. And you took the glamour division and the glamour prize, the heavyweight championship of the world, and just made a political catastrophe off of it, and it was a mess. And you had this mini heavyweight tournament where belts were changing place all around, and fighters that were getting title shots who really shouldn't have. That's why when that happened, it was a bad thing because it's happened from there to now, not just in the heavyweight division, but in virtually every weight class. And we have governing body apologists who are the biggest group of cowards in the fight community. And if I'm talking to you, so what? Who think governing bodies is a good thing? The hell it isn't, because we're half guys in the fight community getting title shots that have no business getting them. We have fighters wearing championships that have no business wearing them, and that's why they're fake champions, due to how the sport just watered out, became this equivalent of this, puzzle, if you want to call it that. And it's a puzzle that nobody wants to try and put together because the power that has got in the middle of it, and when that power gets in the middle of it, dirty things come out. And once those dirty things come out, we have people go hiding into their shells. That was the epitome of the 80s heavyweight division. And this fight between Tim Witherspoon and Tony Tubbs was the epitome of it. And it's not a knock on Witherspoon and Tubbs, who were good heavyweights, not great heavyweights, but they were good heavyweights. And Tony Tubbs won it against Greg Page on some fallacy. Tim Witherspoon had a championship once, lost it to Pinklon Thomas, got it this here on a majority decision. But this fight between Witherspoon and Tubbs was the epitome of what the heavyweight division was in the mid-'80s, after Larry Holmes, and before we saw Buster Douglas come over, shock Mike Tyson, and the 90s came in. Because from Larry Holmes to Buster Douglas, that era was a mess. Champions all over the place. And Don King tried to fork out this tournament, and this fight was in the middle of it. But maybe it was not the best thing for it, because not only did we have, there were basically a bunch of fighters who were good for one or two fights. It got to that point to where they could win a title. But when you want to go another level to defend a title, to be like a Larry Holmes, to be like a Muhammad Ali or a Joe Louis or guys like that, 90% of the bunch couldn't. And that's why the 80s turned up the way it did. And like I said, they were good heavyweights. It's devalued now because of how everything has become, especially in the information era we're in right now, because too many people get suckered into what we see and read. But when you look back at that era, I mean, whether you can say those chunk of those guys, even though they weren't great, they did fight each other. You got to give them that. But that's all you got to give them. I mean, championship belt here, championship belt there. It was bounced around all over the place. I mean, there's so much alphabet soup. I mean, you can buy an alphabet soup box of cereal at a local store, and that doesn't have as much alphabet soup as the world of boxing had at that point, because the corrupt governing body started to expand and just made a mess. And that mess, as if everybody wanted it to be a mess, nobody wanted to clean it up. Until Buster Douglas came around in 1990 and shocked the world. That's where the mess finally got cleaned up. Now, went to a bigger mess down the line because of what happened, largely because of the power and influence of Don King. And the fight followers in the fight game know the power and the influence of Don King boxing. And that's what it became. But before we had all of that, we had this in the 80s. And King put together this mini tournament to have one undisputed champion. Problem is, there were guys in there that had no business in any era fighting for any title. And they were good fighters, but maybe a bunch of them were probably better served as contenders and champions because when they got to that level, when they got to the fighting for a title, they're able to do something. But when you try to get to that next level to defend a title, which any all-time great will tell you, it's a tougher road to defend it than it is to win it. To go from winning a title to defending it, those guys couldn't. This fight between Tim Witherspoon and Tony Tubbs was what one of those fights were, because they were both good enough to win a world title. And in Tim Witherspoon's case, a second 40 years ago tonight when he beat Tubbs to win this belt. But to get to that next level, they couldn't do it. What were reasons for it? Nobody knows. Maybe companies say that run was a bit of an unfulfilled era because they were good enough to be something better than what they were. But for whatever reason, they couldn't. Of course, part of it, we talk about Tim Witherspoon's angle, was his rift with Don King. And the next fight after this, he fought last-minute replacement James Bone Crusher Smith, who pulverized him in a round. And Witherspoon later on admitted to taking a bit of a dive because of his rift with Don King. And his rift with Don King was well chronicled, just like any other heavyweight or any other fighter who was with Don King. And Tony Tubbs, well, being from Cincinnati, that's problem number one for him. Problem number two, like some of those other heavyweights, like Pinklon Thomas, even to an extent of Witherspoon and Tony Tucker and Tyrell Biggs, among others, had a cocaine habit he couldn't break. But those two heavyweights had talent to be more than what they were, but never showed it. And probably go down as that 80s heavyweight era, especially with these two, as an era that could have been more than what it was. But at the end of the day, it turned out the way it did, and there was a reason for it. And that's why when I come on these my shows or any other boxing shows, and I label a fighter a fake champion, it has to do with how the structure of the sport has been set up. And because they want so many belts passed around, and they're being passed around to the wrong guys, we have those kind of fake champions. And it was created by the governing bodies around this time when they started to expand, and the power of a promoter like Don King. And because of it, that's why we have so much of this. And it's gone on for way too long. And that's why they always have this perception of boxing is dying, which I'm not sure I'm going to go that far. But that's why the sport has become a mess. And you're probably seeing the heavyweight division from after Larry Holmes' run started to come to an end, and all of these heavyweights came around, and there's belts being passed around. That's why the heavyweight division became what it was. And this fight 40 years ago between Tim Witherspoon and Tony Tubbs was the epitome of it. This was more about passing the duchy when it comes to belts. Here, you have a belt? No, you have a belt? I don't want it. You have it. That's what happened. And of course, we know what happened in 1990 when James Buster Douglas came into the scene and said, heck with it. Whoever's left standing, I'm cleaning house. And we know what he did February 11th, 1990 to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And just to eradicate that junk in the 80s, and that's what makes that 80s era just a colossal mess. Nothing more needs to be said. Here's one thing everyone misses. Wait, it gets harder on the... And back up for a second. Here's one thing everybody misses. There was a time before we had Super Bowls, World Series and stuff. The prize you wanted was the heavyweight championship of the world. And there was a time when you had one belt, or you can say two belts, and back then two belts were separate. They were together. When you had those belts, the party was over. You were the king of the crop. And when the expenditure went from 2 belts to 3 belts to eventually 4 belts, the value and the validity of championship belts and how the governing bodies are run sank to the depths as low as Enron. And that's why everyone has a complaint. And we have too many apologists for governing bodies acting like championship belts matter when they've lost their luster for at least 4 decades. And everyone in the fight community needs to wake up. Quit worrying about what governing bodies say. Quit mentioning governing bodies in your podcast. Quit mentioning governing bodies in your posts. Because when you do, you lose credibility just as much as governing bodies do, because governing bodies don't deserve any kind of respect or legacy or whatsoever, because they don't have any. I mean, you have a moron like Rick Glazer, who called Jose Suleiman and Robert Lee good men who founded governing bodies, but are just two of the crooked human beings on God's green earth. And that's why Rick Glazer is a coward in the fight community, because he respects governing bodies and governing body presidents way too much. There's the problem. And it's not just Rick Glazer. There's a lot of guys doing that, and that needs to stop. If you're going to be in this fight game, quit giving governing bodies credibility. Quit calling every fight a championship fight. Quit acting like belts matter. Because once you say those things, you have less credibility than them, and that's why you're a mess. And that's what happened 4 decades ago in the heavyweight division, when it became a 2-belt era to a 3-belt era, and there was a tournament put together by Don King. It essentially devalued what being the heavyweight champion of the world was. And because it got devalued, it was as if the wrong guys had the belts. And because those wrong guys had the belts, we had the mess that we had. And it wasn't until James Buster Douglas in 1990, and what he did in Tokyo, Japan, decided to say, heck with it. Whoever's left, bring me the belts. I'll take them. And that's what happened. There's a problem in the fight community, and that needs to stop. Their fights we're talking about, don't mention championships, don't mention belts. Because once you do, you're a moron. And there's a lot of you guys in the fight community, and it might be time for me to put names to you guys as a result. And everybody in Cincinnati knew what I did to them earlier the NFL season. I won't hesitate to do it to you also. Stop mentioning belts. Stop mentioning governing bodies. Stop acting like belts matter, because they don't. Just worry about who's fighting and find a way to make boxing a better sport once again. Period. Lots I can get more into, but it is what it is. Because I tell this to everybody, because I've been around this sport, as much as I've been around the others, and basketball, both NBA and college, NFL. Back recently, a college football game, which I wasn't in for the longest time for many reasons. And I see this equally, and more so, I have a bigger passion for this reason when it comes to boxing. There was a time when you got one belt, you did it. You was at the top of the world, and nobody would. You can't look down at anyone. You just got to look up. When we came to the adventure of the expansion of governing bodies as the way it is today, now becomes a question: who's the man? And because of it, that's why it's been a mess. And I've said this all along. I mentioned about Witherspoon and Tubbs amongst some of those fights in the 80s. When you start getting the wrong guys in that situation, it says more about how it's ran and how the governing bodies are ran. And it's not a shot at the fighters, because if someone told you got a chance to fight for one of those belts, I tell them to go get it. But don't act like because you have a belt around your waist and you have 3 letters next to your name, that it means you did something of significance, because today it doesn't. And that luster with having those 3 belts next to your name as a champion had its value diminished for the longest time. Stop calling everybody a champion. Do what HBO did starting in 1995. Just call people belt holders and don't mention the letters, because that's where HBO just took off. And maybe you can take a look out of what HBO did. Stop mentioning the letters. Stop calling everybody champions. Just call them belt holders and just leave it. Or you can take the route I did and just call them a fake champion, because it's the epitome of what's happened to boxing for the last 4 decades. And the credibility of a belt, I just wonder, I'll put it like this. Bernie Madoff has more credibility than championship belts, okay? That's how bad the credibility of belts are in boxing. Bernie Madoff have more credibility than they do. And that's saying a heck of a whole lot. Enough is enough. Quit making a big deal out of belts. Quit acting like those 3 letters mean something because they don't. Quit acting like wearing a belt around your waist means something because it doesn't. Worry about the who. And once you start worrying about the who, they will have a place to make the sport better. Because the more we can distance ourselves from the governing bodies and their illegitimacy, the better. Everybody in the fight community better start doing that. Case closed. And on that note, that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan, All Era Sports with Sirhan. I apologize, I changed my brand. I'm still used to the old one. Thursday night, it will be a legendary night segment. It will reiterate the most explosive coming out party in sports history. A phenom was introduced. I introduced it Thursday night. But tomorrow night, it's Pick'em Wednesday. I break down both conference championship games, and you're more than welcome to interact with me. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. Always take care of yourself first. Always respect other people's boundaries. Don't let anyone step on your boundaries. You do all of that, all the good things that come your way. And as always, if you missed this show or any others, you can catch the audio versions on iHeartRadio, Apple, and now on Patreon. And tonight, the article on Indiana University will be coming up tonight or tomorrow on Indiana University on my Patreon app. It'll be posted on the platforms. If you'd like to watch the video versions, you can catch the replays on my X profile as well as the Spotify apps. If you want to see this beautiful thing that keeps me warm in the wintertime, this is my cold weather solution. This is my winter weather solution, and it keeps me warm at night. And on that note, have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. I'll see you all tomorrow.